me introduce today our guest speakers. So I'm adding Jeff and Paul to the screen. So let's start with introductions. Jeff, go for it.
Hello, Prasad and Paul. Great to see you both. I'm Jeff Barr. I'm VP and Chief Evangelist for AWS. I'm coming up on 23 years with Amazon. For 20 years, I wrote the AWS news blog and wrapped that up last December. And right now I'm focusing on my new interesting topic is future of software development or next generation development, kind of the two words for the same thing.
Great. Paul.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time it is. Nice to see you again, Jeff. Nice to see you, Prasad. I'm Paul Duffy. I joined AWS originally in 2011. I've left twice and come back twice with adventures at startups in between. And I've generally done roles either being a solution architect, leading solution architect teams, or most recently, the thing I'm doing is leading a technical product marketing team that's trying to help simplify the AWS portfolio for customers. And Jeff and I have known each other a little while at this point.
A very, very long time, actually. So many years ago, I think we're talking 12 years ago now, I used to do a video interview series as part of my job. And Paul was one of my guests. And we did this really fun video of basically what does it take to become a solutions architect. I think I was very young in my interviewing career and skills at that point that we were learning as we went. But 12 years on, it was really fun to do. It was great to actually get to know Paul and to hear a bit about his career back then. So Paul, I do kind of think the role has changed a bit over the last 12 years, and you've had multiple discrete samples. Perhaps you're in a great position to kind of give our audience a sense of how did things actually change.
Yeah. And it's like 12 years. We haven't changed a bit, Jeff. We do look just the same. I was earlier in my interviewee career, so let's see if we do a better job. And it's funny, I had a look at that video just before the call to refresh what we talked about and to think about what's changed and what's stayed the same. So I think in many ways the role hasn't changed, Jeff, in that I think it's still about trying to help customers who've got problems to solve in their business and how they can use various different building blocks in the cloud to do that, and being kind of kind, caring, and good communicating humans who can deal with both the technology stuff, which can be really difficult, and also the human stuff, which can be difficult and easy at the same time. So I think there's a bunch of stuff that hasn't changed. And when I look at SAs who I've worked with from years ago and who I work with now, there's some fundamental things that are the same. On the differences side, though, I think, I've always thought that being a solutions architect is one of the best roles that you can possibly have, and even more so when you're working with AWS cloud technologies. And I think a lot of the differences are just, one, the number of things that we've got that customers can do. And you remember, I was trying to think back to I think that interview we did was just before the first reInvent. And that reInvent was when it was the first time we'd done a big event. It was the first time we'd launched a big product at our conference, and we announced Redshift. And at that time, there weren't a lot of AWS services that were out there. And it was relatively easy to be good enough. My team at the time, it was easy enough to kind of have a good core understanding of the basic building blocks. And then you could use them to build whatever solution that you could possibly imagine. And now customers just have more and more choice of different technologies that can help them get to what they're doing more quickly. And then from our perspective at AWS, it's always let us do more of that undifferentiated heavy lifting work so that you can focus on the higher level stuff. So I think from just doing that role, you're doing the same kind of fundamentals. You have more and more stuff that's in the toolbox so that you can help customers. And then obviously the elephant in the room with every conversation that you have these days, and I've managed to keep a few minutes without saying the term, but the generative AI stuff that you see. And I think the other thing there, Jeff, is just the pace of change has accelerated. I grew up in working in a computer shop in my hometown, building computers, and you would excitedly be waiting for the next version of some software to kind of literally arrive in the mail. And when I first got to AWS, I'd just come from working on package software, and I was thinking, wow, we're shipping stuff to customers every week. This is amazing kind of thing. But you were still dealing with, infrastructure and kind of servers. And I was still SSHing into a kind of Linux server to do that kind of stuff, or connecting to like a MySQL database or whatever. And as I've watched, particularly over the last couple of years, I thought the rate of change was kind of generally fast, but I think with the generative AI change, it's just been so exponential, and it's been such a thing for customers and for architects to learn. So anyway, getting long-winded, but I think big changes are just the amount of stuff that we've got that we can help customers build stuff with. And then I've always thought in our field, you've got to be curious. I mean, you've had an even broader set of it with your time at AWS than me. I've always thought, you have to learn and be curious, and everything's changing. And over the last couple of years, that's just that pace has just increased. So I think if you're a learn and be curious person, you need to be learning more and being more curious. So those are the big changes for me.
I love what you said at the start of your answer about being a kind and caring human. That gets you so far in life, and it's one of those things that you don't always realize you have that in you until you're grown up and you realize you actually are one, and you say, wow, my parents actually did something right, and they helped me to be and grow into that person. And when you're like kind and caring, especially in these technical fields where sometimes we can get a little bit obsessed with the ones and the zeros and the black and the white and think everything is just, it either is or it isn't. And especially you point out, we've got so many services. We're all on these learning journeys, and we're all doing our best to actually learn and to progress, and to have that bit of compassion for people that are trying to navigate their way through this absolute flood of innovation, and say, okay, well, the thing that I thought was innovative last week is last week's news. Now there's a new innovative thing. And if someone didn't actually manage to catch up on the news every last minute of every day, well, be a little bit understanding and say, wow, we're both just surfing this wave of change. And guess what? You blinked and you missed something really interesting. I think that's such an important skill in a fast-paced career. And there's never any shame for someone to be a little bit behind and doing their best to catch up.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
Excellent. So let's kind of talk about what is at AWS we have. I don't even know how many solution architects we have, other than a lot. But what do you actually do on a day-to-day basis? How would you what's kind of how do you find the customer, and how do you get engaged, and what are the set of activities that keep you intellectually challenged and being kind and caring to your customers over the course of a day or a week?
Well, some of it, I think, depends on which kind of customers you work with. But I mean, at the end of the day, this role is all about working with customers. And so typically, solutions architects will be working with other members on an account team to help a certain set of customers. And on that, a lot of it is just, we use the phrase at Amazon a lot, but working backwards from what does the customer want to achieve this year, and how can you help them? And then you're going back to the sort of the learn and be curious. What would you do to help them? And that could be anything from helping a customer understand a new service or a new topic that they just haven't studied before. And we're sort of being that, Andy Jassy famously said, there's no compression algorithm for experience. And I think in some ways, solution architects can be that compression algorithm for customers. So some of it might be literally going and explaining to a customer they haven't used Bedrock, for example, or they're new to, they're an enterprise customer who's thinking about how they can incorporate generative AI into the applications that they're building. So it could be anything from explaining the kind of the basic stuff to them. It could be running some kind of workshop. It could be, the most fun thing, which is whiteboards in the room. You're in the room with the customer. You kind of jamming on the whiteboard for drawing out the architecture that you think is going to make sense. You could be helping them run a proof of concept. You could be speaking at an event about some of the work that you've done with customers. You could be at an event or a trade show. You could be doing some content building. I mean, one of the things that's, I think, always been really fun for a lot of solution architects, many who are way, way better at this than I am, is they're doing all these things with these absolute cutting edge customers. And then how can they share that interesting thought leadership with other folks? Because some of it, some of the work, okay, you're going to a customer, you're explaining some fairly basic stuff for the customer. Well, it may not be basic for the customer, it may be basic for you, but the customer's new to it. But then when you look at the breadth of different customers that people deal with, my most recent experience with solution architecture has been leading a team that works with startups. And when you're hearing about startups like Perplexity or Hippocratic AI or Brainbox AI, these folks are doing really, really cutting edge stuff. And so at that point, you are in the room with that customer, helping them do the kind of the distributed training and setting up, whether it's SageMaker Hyperpod, whether it's using Bedrock, but doing all those things. So the sort of the TLDR on it is every day in a fun way is different. But the two things that are common with everything that I just talked about is it's all about working with customers on one side and really cool technology on the other side, which is why I think the role is such a cool and fun one.
Interesting. So it actually sounds like because you are working with customers and the customers are by definition trying to do something brand new, you get to help them get to and then stay on the leading edge of whatever their path, their technology and their product path is, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing. You talked about the kindness thing. This is the other thing where, especially when people, and I've seen it multiple times in my career now because I'm older than we were when we first started working and first did our last interview like this, that I've always worked on things that are sort of enjoyably disruptive. So the first time I saw this was kind of core client server stuff, moving from mainframes and AS400s, which, hopefully many in this audience will never work with a mainframe or an AS400. Then to like voice over IP and convergence of like desktop comm software versus PBXs and IP PBXs, and then now working with cloud technologies. And, and particularly with generative AI. And sometimes these things can just be angst-inducing for people because it's a big change to what they've been doing. If you're a PBX person, it's like, what's happening with this IP stuff? Is it going to take my job away? Is it going to change what I need to know? And again, if you've been in a kind of a server in an on-premises environment, how's it going to change stuff? So yeah, you're helping customers deal with all these changes that are happening in their environment. You've got to do it in a way that helps them absorb that change. And that's why I think, I would just emphasize again the kindness thing and the human part of it is so important.
It is, and that angst and induction, I guess. There is a real challenge because people spent a lifetime building up a set of skills, and you come in with something brand new, and you are empowering them, but at the same time they say, how are my old skills still relevant in this new world? And being compassionate and understand that and say, okay, let me help you to be in the best possible situation to help drive your organization forward is essential.
Yeah.
So kind of I know we're part of the kind of behavioral track of our lesson today. What are when we say kind and compassionate, what kind of like interpersonal skills do you think are the really super helpful ones to succeed as a solutions architect?
Well, some of this is going to sound like so obvious that I always hate talking about this because it's like being patronizing but experience has taught me that no, actually sometimes we can forget these things. And I think technical people, and you said it before with the ones and noughts, technical people really like to know the answer. And I can actually tell you from my earliest days I was doing technical support at Microsoft, and there was nothing more satisfying in a way than doing kernel debugging and getting down to the source code and being like, aha, like I have found the answer. Like I have found this bug in the Windows kernel and I know exactly why this thing has happened. And this is the satisfaction of getting it right. I think one of the biggest things that is important is just this. We've talked a little bit about the compassion and so on, but it's listening. It's making sure that you are really using your listening skills to understand what the customer needs. It's a kind of a teach thing versus a tell thing often in these kind of roles, because you're dealing typically with customers who are the experts of what they're doing. You're not the expert in the kind of the retail company, or you're not the expert in the work that Perplexity is doing, or if you're working with a Stripe, you're not the financial services expert, but hopefully you are the cloud expert and you can help them. And I think a lot of that it's doing the listening stuff. It's doing the right kind of sort of challenging to the customers, because they may not know the sort of the cloud or architectural stuff, because especially in the startup world, if you're a startup solutions architect, you are doing this every single day. with lots of different customers. But if you're the customer, you are one customer. You are just doing this with your architecture. So if you're the solution architect, you can bring to bear a lot of that stuff to sort of gently and sort of, this is where it's just, it is the sort of behavioral, it's not a binary ones or zeros thing, but how do you sort of gently prod the customer in the right direction? And then I'll give you another example that I think can be one of the hardest things for solution architects, but I think it's a very good example for this behavioral thing, which is, when I first got to AWS, I heard Adam Slipsky, former CEO, who used to kind of be our boss back in those days, Jeff. One of the things he said is, I want our customers to spend the smallest amount of money possible with us. And that really stuck with me. And I kind of loved it, because you go to customers and it's like, how can I reduce your bill? Like, how can I help you spend less money on the cloud stuff that you're using? And a lot of customers were kind of like, wow, never heard, like, we're not used to that kind of thing.
It's a surprise.
So step one is like, okay, you can do all that kind of stuff. And you go through the whiteboard exercise, you look at all the stuff in the architecture, and you kind of turn in the screws on all of that stuff. Or in the modern world, maybe we can use some serverless stuff like Lambda functions to reduce the number of servers, but whatever. You sort of do the basic cost optimization stuff. And it's very easy at that point to be like, job done, I'm moving on. The much harder thing is like, okay, customer, I've helped you now do this kind of thing. You still have a bunch of business problems. And of course, you would prefer to spend less money than more money. And we would always want to help you do that. But you still got a stack of business problems. We've still got a stack of technology stuff. And you've just saved a bunch of money. How can we now help you with that sort of blank sheet of paper, new stuff that you hadn't had on your list because you've been having all this other architecture? So I think sometimes doing that stuff comes less naturally because it's kind of more ambiguous and you've still got to push people more. But that can be the hallmark of some of the best solution architects ever, because they do the sort of trust earning, reduce the amount people are spending stuff. And then it's like, wow, you've now just taken this customer to a place they didn't even think they could get to with some new technology, helping solve their business problem, and doing the right thing to delight their customers. And so anyway, I mixed a few things in.
Sure, no, that's super helpful. So I know that we have several levels of solutions architect at AWS. We have the associate, the senior, and the principal. Do you have a good way to explain kind of the expectations of like the responsibilities at those levels, or how do we tell them apart, or how do you qualify for one versus the next?
Well, and I'd love you to push back if you disagree, but here is my take on that. So yeah, we do. We have everything from associate solution architects, and there's one of my favorite programs at AWS is one called TechU. And TechU is something that takes folks who are often coming right at the start of their career. Maybe they've come out of college. I did not go to college, so maybe they haven't gone to college, but they end up in this program that starts them off. And the associate solution architect, often, and this is the one thing I'm really interested to see what you think, Jeff, but often the associate solution architects can sometimes be sort of some of the deepest technical folks, because they've just come from university courses maybe, or they've come from boot camps, or they've just done deep stuff. And they're at their start of their career. They're typically focused on things that are a little bit narrower in scope. So if you're an associate solutions architect, we're probably not going to send you on the first day to talk to the CTO of a 100-year insurance company. That conversation might not be the best one for anybody. But you might well go to that big insurance company to do a workshop and to do some deep cloud workshop on a technology that's relevant for the customer. Or if you've just finished your education, or you're just at the start of your career, unlike the sort of the older folks like me with more gray hair, you may have just been looking at machine learning or AI stuff, because it is the sort of the zeitgeisty stuff that's happening. So you could be the very useful sort of disruptive stuff to go on. And then we have everything all the way up to kind of principal solution architects and senior principal solution architects. And at those levels, oftentimes it's not about becoming more technical per se. It's just that you're starting to work on more and more broader problems where the ambiguity is much higher. And I always used to think about it. My mental model was, so the more senior the solution architects you get, the more it becomes a case of, you're at the start of your career, and I remember this at the start of my career, it's like, go and solve this very specific thing, and you can kind of, like I was saying, you can go into the source code and get down to that bug in the Windows kernel, and the sort of the constraints on what you're doing are quite tight. And at the most senior levels, it's like, I don't really know what the problem is with this customer. Go and find out if you can find what the problem is. And once you've found out what the problem is, see if you can solve it. And if you thought about an enterprise customer, it's like you're going into a room with a bunch of different people and different teams who might have different agendas on what they're trying to do. And it's like, go and sort that out. And with that room, going back to what we were talking about, the kind of the behavioral stuff, that is not about going into the room and saying, here is the answer, I have the right answer. It's a kind of a technical answer. It's understanding all of the needs of those people, some of which will be technical, some of which may not be technical. And then how can you advance that forward? Or how can you help that large group of people to change their thinking about architecture? That's pretty hard. And that when I'm thinking about the kind of the principal technologists we have there, not only are they kind of super broad and deep technologists, but they can also go and make that happen in a really, really complex and ambiguous environment.
Interesting. So again, we kind of come back to people skills, right? Like being able to understand the bigger picture, and you don't come in with just your book and say, okay, here's the way we do it, but to be able to get into that situation and say, let me listen, let me learn, let me understand the constraints that you and your organization and your business are operating within. Challenge some of those if they are seemingly fixed but actually variable, but others say, well, this is part of the world that you live in, and I will propose solutions respectfully that fit within whatever those constraints might happen to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I will use the word like armadillo here as an example, which, well, bear with me, I'm going somewhere, but it's like, armadillos, they have this kind of hard shell, but yet they're soft within. And I think this is probably the single biggest thing that I've learned over the years of hiring and working with many different solution architects, which is, and I use the word relatively very deliberately here, in that it is relatively easy to find super deep technical people and software engineers. Obviously, we know it's really difficult to find technical people generally, but relatively easy to find those people. It's relatively easy to find people with generically good communication skills. The thing that is really difficult that I have found is it's this intersection where you've got the people who've got both kind of thing. And also, the nice thing about the world is lots of different people. I would be the worst developer in the world. I'm not going to put any developers at a risk of losing their job. And I just don't think I would enjoy that role. But I've always loved the solution architect role because I get to do technical stuff with people. I get lots of variety. That's the other big thing for me. And I get to communicate and help see these things happen with humans. And those are all things I love a lot.
Interesting. So we have a really interesting related question to that. We have a question from our audience. How can a developer transition to a solutions architect? It seems like even with the tech skills, prior experience is needed. But the way you described it almost sounds like developers, solution architects. Is there a well-trodden path from one to the other, or is that just kind of different jobs?
Well, they're different jobs, but I think that's a transition that you see often. Like when I look at a lot of the people, I mean, it's funny, in our video years ago, you were saying, where do these people come from a community? And it's not like the solution architect is a career thing that's 100 years old, like a professional violinist or a kind of a physician or something like that. So the paths are a little bit less well-trodden. But I think if you're a developer, and by the way, this is also how I've done a bunch of different things in my career, and this is my generic mental model for this. But I think if you're a developer, you've probably got the core technical skills at the kernel there. Sometimes you might need to get a little bit more breadth for the sort of the architectural layer stuff that you can do with customers. But if you fundamentally are a technical person and you can learn technical concepts and you have the passion to do the role, and that's the other thing, like, don't be a solution architect if you don't like the sound of this role. And it's okay to not want to do, it's okay to not want to do that stuff. But I think if you're a developer, find some solution architect friends, ride along with them, go to customers with them. And that will, see if you actually like the role. The other thing that often ends up being a really useful thing to help people transition is, if you're a developer and you're a technical and you're not yet a solution architect, you've probably got some really useful technical stuff that the customers can benefit from. So find yourself a solution architect friend and go to some customer meeting and find what is the unique thing that you can help with in that meeting that will start to let you sort of test drive the role. I've had in the past a bunch of people who were developers who want to do solution architects, and it's like, we'll do an assessment, we'll see, can they give a good presentation? Can they do an architectural session? And every time someone does a transition, there's always a risk. I've loved taking risks on folks like that. But I think if you're a developer, find someone who's doing that thing, be their friend, ride along with them. That is how I have got a bunch of jobs in my career. And you could get a job out of it. You could find out you don't really like the role, but it's going to be an interesting experience.
I really like that idea. And to me, it points out that there's room for a lot of different skill sets and personality types to succeed in this role. And that there isn't just one mold that you need to fit into. Now, kind of related to that, and this is a good question I actually have had personally, but coming from our audience says, do we need to excel at all 200 plus AWS services to be an SA? Is that even possible?
Well, I don't know. Do you excel at all 200 plus services, Jeff?
Definitely not.
No, I mean, and I think that was interesting in what we were talking about before, in that when we did that first interview, I think you and I could probably have talked at a pretty decent level about most of our services, just because there weren't very many. And now I think it would be difficult for us to name every single service and kind of give a detailed presentation. So I think, depending on the role, I mean, we've got lots of different types of SAs here at AWS, where we have generalists who are kind of broad technologists across the AWS cloud as a whole. We've got people who are specialists. I think if you're a generalist, I try and think of the visual analogy I like here. I think you end up having sort of the core stuff, and also being an architect. I mean, at one level, kind of architecture is architecture. You've got to know how things fit together. So you end up with a core understanding of how the most common services fit together. And then I think you end up being this kind of, it's like dancing on a sort of a spinning ball that you've got to be very agile. It's like, or spinning plates or something, where you're quickly going to go and learn enough about the next thing that you need to talk to the customer about. And then also recognize when we can't know everything, when to call for help.
Yeah.
So
that's such an important skill all by itself, right? You can't fake it. And when you realize you're about to reach that cliff of your knowledge and you're nothing, you have to throw up your hands and say, I know nothing now, but let me find a specialist, or let me study up on this so I can help you. So such an important thing to do.
And on that actually related, Jeff, I mean, this is and I always used to do this at interviews back in the day, that I do not know everything, far from it. And with any technical field, I mean, I grew up with a whole bunch of professional musicians, people who are now professional musicians, and they kind of actually do know everything for their instrument. Like they're at the level where they can play any piece on a violin because the music's kind of all written by people who've been dead for a long time. That isn't the case for us. And it's almost like you keep hitting refresh in your career, and it's like, I thought I used to know all this stuff, and now everything has changed, kind of thing. So just knowing, like, my value, and almost the more senior you get, the more common that this will be the case, where it's like, I don't know the answer to this question. I know how I'm going to go and get the answer to this question. But that level of comfort that we would do it. If you're doing an interview, you keep asking technical questions, you're going to get to a point pretty quickly where someone is either going to be telling fibs, or they have to say, I don't know. And it's one of the most attractive traits sometimes. And it also helps customers that we're not oracles. And of course there's going to be something, and you've got to be comfortable with that kind of ambiguity where you don't know everything.
Right. And it also actually earns trust with the customer, and they realize that you are just as human as they are, and that you don't know everything you're trying. Okay, let's see. We only have looks like about a minute left. Give us your 1 minute pitch on how GenAI intersects with solution architecture and how one affects the other.
Well, I think that let's try and do it pithy in a minute. I think I would just say that two different levels. I think one, it will be a sort of a superpower for any solution architect, in that we just talked about how it's difficult to know everything about every platform. So in a way, the generative AI tools that will exist out there will end up being a superpower for any solution architect working on something. In that you almost think about, like, someone is extending their arm to point to a whiteboard, and the power of generative AI somehow makes all this stuff appear on the whiteboard and accelerates that work for somebody, so that they can then do the value add of what they are as a human, as a solution architect. So think gives you wings, gives you superpowers. I truly believe that. And it's a real thing that's going to be a change agent for what a solution architect can do. And then the other side for it, I think, is on the customer side, which is, oh, wow, the things that customers are building and what that will do in turn for their end customers, whether it's companies like Brainbox, who are doing stuff to reduce the carbon footprint of many, many different customers, whether it's Hippocratic AI, who are doing all of this stuff of providing healthcare related stuff with the models that they're building that are specific to healthcare, and what that can do to countries that can't afford to deploy humans to do some of that healthcare. And this is something that is a force for good for human health. And what could be more inspiring than that? Or tools that are kind of permeating every day of our lives, like Perplexity. So that's probably longer than a minute, but those are my two angles. And I think it makes this role, which I think is one of the best roles as a technologist you can do, makes it even more exciting, in my opinion.
Sounds awesome. Well, I think Prashad probably wants us to just about wrap things up, but this has been a total blast to kind of revisit our conversation 12 years later, and let's not wait another 12 to do it.
I was just about to say, yes, let's not wait another 12 years. Lovely to talk to you, Jeff.
We would love to have you again, and we can keep hearing you for another hour. And if you look at the questions, not only on the private chat but on the YouTube that we are getting, it's like blowing up. So we will not be able to answer every question today, but don't worry, we have more guest speakers lined up for the 8 weeks. We have sessions on solutions architect role itself, how the whole interview process goes, like how what the role is and what are the different levels and specialities, from which different roles you can transition into solutions architect role, how the transition would look like. We will cover all of those in the coming weeks. But thank you, Jeff and Paul, so much for joining us. And very early for you folks, and thank you so much.
This was
thank
super
you so
fun.
much,
Thanks
Paul,
for watching, and thanks for the great questions.
Our pleasure.
Oh, it was a great session. I would suggest people to stop once you have time, rewatch it. It's not like just in 30 minutes you would hear all the wisdom. You may have to rewatch it again. So please rewind and rewatch. There's really cool stuff there. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.